Hi everyone, this is Shadab here from the AI Files.
And you got Jamie here as well. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending upon what time it is in your neck of the
Absolutely,
woods.
absolutely, and this is our episode number one, really. So the first episode, we are very excited for this channel launch. We really want to share our learning, and in the process, learn ourselves. Really, that's the goal. So thanks for joining, whoever is watching. So just a quick introduction. I'm Shadab Hussain. I am data and AI seller specialist from Microsoft. Been in this industry for about 22 years, and all I do is data analytics and AI. And that's what actually I want to share today.
And just a reminder, I'm Jamie, avid storm chaser and avid data and AI technologist here at Microsoft as well. So glad to have everyone back or listening in. If this is your first time listening to the AI files, welcome aboard. What we do here, on these various different recordings, we'll have different segments. More than likely, we're always going to start off with a news roundup, things that are, I don't call them maybe like hot topics. Obviously, we don't do this podcast every day, so we're going to take or maybe cherry pick some of the top hitting news articles, interests that will impact the data and AI space. So let me start off with one, and this is sort of a head scratcher, to be honest with you, for me, and it's really about Apple's back and forth with how they're getting into AI, specifically around large language models. I don't know how much of you may have been following, but Apple obviously has certainly been late to the game with looking at large language models. Siri is definitely way behind any and other quote unquote user agent out there. I'm an iPhone user myself, so I'm um, anxiously awaiting what Apple may be doing as it relates to large language models. So there was an interesting white paper that Apple came out with recently. They've been doing some research and development around large language models. Specifically, they have something called MM1, and that was, Apple's deep thinking around how to build and train a large language model that could be used across Apple's products. And again, a lot of this, from reading their paper as well as then doing some of my own research. But thought would be that this might go into their MacBook line or maybe into iPad or the iOS, hitting the iPhones.
Even watch.
Yeah, even the watch. But here's the perplexing part. This past week, there's been some news rumors, quote unquote, I'm using the air quotes here, but pretty substantiated, that Apple's in talks with Google to maybe bring their Gemini models to Apple. Does that mean they're going to bring, Gemini Nano to the iPhone? I don't know. Could be. Are they going to bring maybe the Pro or Gemini Pro into maybe their MacBooks? Again, who knows? But that's been widely reported this past week, and actually 2 or 3 days ago, there's even been some additional reports that Apple may be in touch with OpenAI, and that's not surprising. I don't think they're going to lock into any one vendor, if you will, if they are really going down that path. The other thing too that I read in that is in China, obviously there's a lot of rules and regulations and restrictions on what can be done in China. But they've been in discussions with another third party there that's sanctioned by the Chinese government for large language models. So that, again, is something that's very much interesting. We'll see how that plays out over the next, couple of weeks. Again, whether or not they develop their own models or work in conjunction with somebody like Google. Very interesting in my book. Anyway, segueing into another interesting news article.
Yeah, that's I think an interesting point, Jamie. That Are the big players going to develop their own LLMs, or are they going to work off others? Are they going to pick some of the open source ones and develop on top of that? It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting development, I think, over the next few years. Obviously, developing your own LLMs give you a little bit more control, bit more competitive advantage, what that you can bring. But it's hard to predict at this point of time what's going to happen. I think a lot of big players are gonna do their own thing. A lot of a little bit smaller one, they will actually try to do something based off the open source. But it would be interesting to see what route the Apple is going to take. They're going to do something of their own, or they will continue to build using others. So something to watch out for.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess again, the speculation is whether or not this is going to make its way into iOS 18. Again, still a lot that's being speculated out there, but Apple's under tremendous pressure to put some AI into their operating systems, into the phone. You see that with the other other products that are out there. So it's not surprising that they're looking at or getting into that type of technology. Anyway, another big news item this past week was the Nvidia's GTC conference. Going back maybe when that conference started, I think they literally had, you can count the people by the hundreds. I think the last count that I saw for this past conference last week was 11,000 attendees. Obviously, NVIDIA is at the heart of this whole AI revolution. They're the ones that are really, supplying the technology in terms of hardware that is, being able to run, train, do inference on all these models that we talk about. So super important. So there's just been a wealth of things that were announced at this GTC conference. Probably the biggest thing, not only for me, but everybody that has been either there or following it, is the unveiling of their Blackwell chip. This is the next iteration. I think it's been 2.5 years in the making since the Hopper chip was released. But for what NVIDIA is claiming, this Blackwell chipset or platform, 2.5 times faster for training and 5 times faster for inference over the Hopper platform. That is just huge. When you think about all the compute power that's needed by Microsoft, Google, Anthropic, Amazon, you name it, going through that list, NVIDIA is at the heart of it. And if they're being able to bring this next platform architecture chipset through Blackwell, and if they're able to get what they're claiming as far as 5 times faster for inference, that's going to be a game changer, let alone for NVIDIA stock. So widely interested in what happens here. But there were just a wealth of other announcements that NVIDIA made, things on their own. So it's not just about the Blackwell chip, but also other partnerships. I know Microsoft was part of those announcements as well at the conference. Obviously, everything from Microsoft going to adopt Blackwell to integration with Microsoft Copilots, which by the way, we'll talk a little bit later on, as well as things that Microsoft is going to do in conjunction with NVIDIA around industry leading and or industry integrations, specifically things like around healthcare. So in my opinion, huge announcements, huge conference. I'm anxious to see again where this goes and how well organizations can adopt these new chipsets.
I agree. I think that was a pretty actually breakthrough announcement. Having these two chips combined. I think computing is essentially becoming the new currency, and whoever owns the computing is gonna own actually the overall outcome which will come out of the AI. So I think Sam Altman has been talking about that. The computing as the key currency of the future, and that's true. I think that it looks like that way. Even though others are trying, but I think Nvidia still holds the key.
Yep,
Um,
agree.
by the way, we
Well,
talk a lot about the Microsoft, and I just wanted to put on the record that while both of us work at Microsoft, this is actually not an official Microsoft AI channel. We will talk about, as you will see in our launch episode, we will talk about everything uh, beyond Microsoft as well. And we are not here to promote Microsoft product, although we love it. But this is not an official Microsoft channel. Okay, so just something to remember. Um, well, in the other thing, Jamie, the another important announcement again talking about Microsoft is the Mustafa Suleyman and one of his key aide, Karen, joining Microsoft AI. I think that's another game-changing announcement. So much is happening just within a span of 1 or 2 weeks. It's another game-changing. It's clearly indicating that future where the things are heading to. Microsoft AI is going to be a consumer focused division. It will focus on a lot of the consumer based products, so the Bing, Edge, and Microsoft Copilot. And it's going to be amazing because it is very clear that it's going to be targeted towards consumer. That means it falls directly in the area where Google plays. So it's going to be like bringing the big tech while they you know collaborate in a lot of things. They will also be competing in a lot of things, of course, and it's going to be a new battlefront between Microsoft and Google. To say, even the other players may also join, right? I mean, it is something the Meta wants to also capture that space. Apple wants to capture the space. But it's going to be game changing. What do you think about that, Jamie?
Oh, I definitely think it is, game changer. I mean, not only internally within Microsoft, forming a new division, but I take a step back and think about what this potentially may mean for other organizations that are trying to build foundational models. So, again, Mustafa and Karen, they came from a company called Inflection. Mustafa certainly has a long history of in the AI space. One of the founders at DeepMind, and obviously Inflection. But they've been building a large language model at Inflection. By the way, Inflection still exists, and I think there's some confusion, at least from what I've heard or read from people, thinking that Inflection is being consumed by Microsoft. That's not true. While yes, granted, Mustafa and Karen are coming over to Microsoft, and some of the key developers are coming over as well, following them. But Inflection still exists. But I think the bigger takeaway from me is this a sign of what I'll call maybe those second tier companies reevaluating how they're playing against some of the bigger organizations that are building the foundational models, whether or not that's Google um, or obviously OpenAI, and you could rattle off the other ones. But you know, is this a sign for something else down the road? Again, time will tell. But to me, that's another takeaway that I take. Other than just a couple of people coming into Microsoft and starting a new quote unquote division.
Yeah, actually, in another breaking news, Imad Mushtaq, CEO of Stability AI, has just resigned as well. And he says that you cannot take on the centralized AI by or through the another centralized AI, right? I mean, so interesting statement. Breaking news. We'll learn more about it, but it certainly looks like, Jamie, what you're referring to. A lot of companies evaluating the plan and thinking about the future. I think there could be some consolidation. There could be some reevaluation of the direction that the companies are taking. By no means that this space is going to be still limited. There will continue to be a lot of innovation, a lot of new players that will keep coming to the space.
Yeah, definitely. Things are changing so rapidly. What's here today probably will not be here in 3 months, 6 months, let alone a year.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let me take maybe one last item for our rapid news, which doesn't seem maybe so rapid, but good news altogether. So I think one of the biggest things when we think about AI, these large language models, is what training or what data is being used inside of or being used inside of or for these models. So there was a company that went IPO this past week, Reddit. Reddit's been around for a while, obviously. I'm a casual user of Reddit. So the IPO went up and it went up 50%. I think it was either the opening day or slightly thereafter. The point that I want to make here is, why did it go up? There was obviously a bunch of announcements made by Reddit, but one of the things that kind of stood out was they were touting that Reddit data would be used for AI training. And there was some, again, speculation that Google is one of the quote unquote buyers of the, at least what's being reported as guaranteed revenues for this current year, that being 2024, of $66 million to Reddit's bottom line, is being used for training within AI, AI data, AI models. And again, the speculation is that Google is one of those buyers. I guarantee you, if it's Google, great, but I guarantee you there's other companies that are going to be right behind them. So if Reddit is selling the data, that is always something that companies are going to be interested in. Again, think big players as well as small. And I go back to the point that I just made: $66 million of guaranteed minimum revenue. I heard something even as high as $203 million at Reddit for what they're licensing to these companies. And again, that's a bigger topic when we talk about licensing data, because there's legal ramifications. Who's got what? Who's allowed to see what? So if Reddit is going to be in the game of licensing, again, this is something that will point to an ever increasing valuation within their stock. And the bigger issue, or the bigger takeaway here on that one, is the companies that are going to be using it.
It's a great example of the data monetization. I'm sure it will come with its own challenges, but yeah, so I think it is very clear the AI is not just about the models, the infrastructure and the computing and the data all play very important roles. So there'll be players not just building the models, but also monetizing data. We talked about it. This is evolving space. New regulations are coming, and we'll talk about it some of our subsequent episodes as well. But this will be a fantastic and evolving space that will bring a lot of new kind of issues and the topics that need to be discussed. Um, Continuing on, the another important development that happened was actually the release of Sora. So it is a text to video generation capability that OpenAI released. It's a very limited release. So it's only for the research purpose. It's not available actually for the commercial purpose yet. It's not even open to the public. They just release the new videos as they're developing based on the prompt. So you provide a text prompt, and that creates a video. I think there is a limit to it right now. It's less than a minute or so, but it's a fascinating new development because the quality of those videos are unbelievable. So they're so real in many aspects, but on the other hand, there are also actually aspects where they don't really do so well. Sometimes the cause and effect, the physics, the real world physics do not really apply. Sometimes we see that, seen some of those videos, the puppies are multiplying as they're playing. So there's still no wonder that it is still a release, and they're inviting people to actually share the prompt, and then they're still playing with it. But it's a fascinating new development because this can have actually a lot of new implications as well as the applications.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, it's a game changer. I mean, if you look at what is out there today as far as video generation, most clips are, what, 4 seconds, 6 seconds long. This is a minute. It Sora has got a wildly different way of actually building its output. They do it based upon forgetting the actual term, but it's basically like little clusters of a video, and they get stitched together, and then they use that over and over again to build these models, or sorry, to build the videos. So definitely groundbreaking. I would say one of the things that popped up in the news this past week, however, around Sora, was the training data that went into enabling Sora to do what it does. So there was a little bit of what data was actually in there. They couldn't necessarily say if it was data from YouTube or other outlets that you're probably familiar with. So will be interesting to see where not only how Sora kind of builds out over the next couple of months, but also maybe further explanation of how Sora was trained on some of its pieces. And by the way, I'm anxious to get my hands on Sora. So we haven't been able to get onto it yet. It's being very closely tied to just individuals that are aligned with video industry, if you will. So anxious to get it.
Yeah, and I think looking at it from the point of what does it really change, right? So I think it is very clear that and that's why no wonder the Hollywood is a little bit anxious about it. A lot of creative industry is a little bit anxious, although they are working together with the OpenAI, and they are jointly exploring together. But it's going to be it's going to be fascinating, right? I mean, it makes it so easy to do a quick prototype, doing a prompt and see. But will it really scale, become the full-fledged production you can do? Things like that, it is yet to be explored. But clearly, the use cases will be in the filmmaking, maybe video game development, and in the corporate, it could be probably in the creative, like training or the marketing. And you could actually create some of those settings and see how the storyline will come out. Um, but these are the technology which are actually triggering more and more imagination, so it will be fascinating to see what all the use cases that will emerge in the corporate world as well as the real world. So, by the way, good name as well. I like the name. I think it's a Japanese word, meaning something like the open sky.
Oh, I
Um,
didn't know where the name came from. That's pretty cool.
yeah, it's pretty cool, I think. And one of the important things is that it actually builds upon the GPT models and the DALI 3 and DALI 2 models that have been in the past, because what it can do is not only it can generate the videos based on the text prompt, it can actually extend the videos. So it can, I think those capabilities, of course, they are not in the hands of the public right now, but it can also take some of those videos and extend them. It can take some of the still images and create the videos out of that. So it's going to be actually a really, really new kind of line of possibility that's going to actually open. So I'm also very excited and waiting for it to actually come in the hands of the public and the commercial release, to see what else gonna public gonna make out of it.
Awesome. Hey, let me cover one next item here, and it's not necessarily something that was released or hit the news in the last 2 weeks. It's relatively recent. It's within the last month, but it shows how the industry is really progressing. And what am I actually talking about here? It's the Anthropic Claude 3 models. So Anthropic's been around for a while. Obviously, their latest, or the previous one, Claude 2. It's a great model. And the reason why Claude 3 is of interest is that GPT-4 has been around, when you really think about it, for over a year. And in the sense of AI, that's like a really, really long time ago, at least it seems. And so there's a lot of advancements. So, we've had Gemini, we've had, Llama, the Meta's Llama 2 come out. Llama 3 is theoretically close by. And now with Anthropic, with Claude 3. So let me explain a little bit about Claude, at least to give everyone an understanding of what they've put out there. So Claude 3, again, as I mentioned, it's from Anthropic. It represents their next generation of AI technology. And what they're really trying to hit is high degrees of performance, the versatility of their models, as well as then user control. So what's interesting is that I kind of draw parallels to what Google Gemini had come out with in terms of Ultra Pro and Nano. But Claude kind of follows similar with the same kind of structure. So they've got Opus, which is their most powerful, most complex model. It's meant to be the state of the art performance, human-like understanding. Think about the use cases would be open-ended conversation, complex collaboration, different advanced coding tasked, obviously around multilingual applications as well. So that's Opus. Again, their most advanced model. They have an in-between one called Sonnet. So this is a model that's balanced for intelligence as well as speed. It's a great option and a cheaper option for doing enterprise grade workloads and scaled AI deployments. Think about the typical things that an enterprise might do, such as like knowledge retrieval, being able to do sales automation, content generation, data extraction. That's really where Sonnet fits very well. And then you have their smallest, quote unquote, fastest and compact model, which is called Haiku. And this is really meant for quick interactions, real-time applications, efficient data processing. So, again, those are the three models. Probably one of the biggest things that I take away from this is the ever-increasing context window size. So each of these models actually has a context window of 200,000 tokens. Put it in perspective, 200,000 tokens is about 150,000 words. Or if you really like Unicode characters, it's about 680,000 Unicode characters. So when we say about loading up into a model, these bigger context windows enable the model to be able to understand more without having to employ something like a RAG pattern or graph concepts, which is another growing concept in the sense of large language models, which, by the way, might be a great topic for a subsequent show. But so anyway, walk away with this: three different models, three different scenarios or use cases for using them, and a larger context window. Put it in perspective: the largest OpenAI context window right now is 128,000 tokens. Gemini, if you're at least looking at Gemini Pro 1.5, that is a million context window. Granted, I haven't necessarily seen that in practice yet, but so bottom line: Opus, Sonnet, Haiku, larger context window. They fit for potentially where different use cases, if you will. By the way, I forgot to mention the max output token for each of those models is 4,000 tokens. You put that in perspective. 4,000 is the output of the latest OpenAI GPT-4 0125 model, but it still is less than the 0613 OpenAI GPT-4 model, which is 32,000 tokens for an output. One thing that I'll point out, and again, I've been looking at this and trying to dive a little bit deeper, price points. For most cases, price points are based upon the number of tokens. What's interesting is that for these Claude 3 models, they've switched around the way that they look at cost per model. Typically, it's been per 1,000 tokens, but for whatever reason, for these Claude 3 models, the costing is based upon 1 million tokens. I'm not really quite sure if that was meant to throw off people or not. So I converted that into the cost per 1,000 tokens. When you look at the Haiku, which is their smallest model, and Sonnet, the cost per token, at least when I compare it against GPT-4 Turbo 0125 version model, the cost is definitely less. I'll give you one quick example. So like if you're looking at Claude 3 Sonnet, the cost for input, by the way, when you look at inference, it's broken out by input and by the output. So basically the prompt and the generation. The cost for Claude 3 Sonnet is 0.003 cents per 1,000 tokens, and the output is 0.015 for output. Compare that to GPT-4, it's less expensive with Claude 3 Sonnet. As a comparison, GPT-4 is 0.01 per 1,000 tokens, and it's 0.03 for output, or 3 cents per 1,000 on the output. So bottom line, it's more expensive to run GPT-4 than it is the Claude 3 Sonnet model. However, when you look at Opus, which is the most capable model, it's actually more expensive than GPT-4 Turbo. As an example, the input or the prompt is 0.015 per 1,000 tokens. But when you compare that to GPT-4, which is 0.01, that means that the Opus model is 50% more expensive to run as an input, and the output token is even more expensive. It's actually double. It's point point. It's actually even more than that. It's 0.075 cents per 1,000 for output versus GPT-4, which is 0.03 or 3 cents per 1,000 tokens. So it's more than double to generate output on an Opus model. So the bottom line, just be aware of cost. It's going to be highly dependent upon which model. Now, one other thing which I'll mention is how well is it, or how good are these models? Now, if you go out to the Anthropic site, you'll see some of the benchmarks they put out there. I'm always skeptical of benchmarks when the company, puts it out there, especially if you're not able to test some of the stuff. There's a very widely known MMLU, which is the undergraduate level knowledge. So Claude 3 Opus is supposed to be better than GPT-4 with a 5-shot knowledge MMLU test. Again, do that with a fine grain of salt. I think a lot of this you want to test with yourself. The output of all this, or the outcome of all this, is that there's some people that have already done their testing to do some comparative tests. So I'll put in the show notes. There's a very interesting models test out of the Beborn. They went through a whole bunch of different series of tests. I actually ran through one of them. I'll show you that in a second. But a synopsis of their testing is definitely the Opus model is capable, but it did not come close to beating either GPT-4 or Gemini 1.5 Pro in various different tests, as well as some of the reasoning tests did not perform as well as GPT-4 and Gemini. But the models are pretty capable. I don't want to say that they're not. So my takeaway comment here would be, don't take anyone's word for it. Put it in your own hands, do your own tests, and try them out side by side.
Yeah. And I think the other perspective to that is, JB, what I've seen is, you know, um, as long as you have a model which is able to do your task, you don't need to switch because of, like a little bit different performance benchmark. Because what I've seen is the performance benchmark can differ significantly depending on use case to use case as well. Some use case may require less completion, some may require more. So I think it is important to do a thorough testing um, before you actually make those judgments. Um,
Yeah,
and
definitely.
and remember that the models are an evolving thing, right? I mean, yeah, one company releases something, another company will release in another 6 months, and then this just cycle that will continue going on. It's actually great that there's a lot of innovation happening and the companies are pushing each other, but it's a continuous cycle.
Yeah, definitely. Let me show you a little bit of that when we talk about using these models or making your own judgment. I'm showing you the Anthropic site. If you notice here, this is where you could try Claude 3. Some of those benchmarks that I was mentioning are here on their site. Like I said, fine grain of salt, do your own testing. But to that point, here's a little test. So when you try this out, you can hit the console. And my whole screen just went blank. There you go. Took a little while to come up. So here's a small little test where I'm in Anthropic, and again, I'm going through their workbench, similar to like a playground. I gave it a system prompt. I'm going to use the same system prompt inside of OpenAI as well. System prompt, your intelligent assistant who's an expert in advanced reasoning. Questions can be tricky, so think intelligently. What I asked of it was, what's heavier, a kilo of feathers or a pound of steel? Now, you can see the output here. A kilo of feathers and a pound of steel have the same weight. It's obviously not true. And it starts to give some reasoning, but it kind of falls short of using that same reasoning to be able to answer the question. If I show that same, um, let me, my webpage seems to be going a little bit wacky, but here it is. Here's that same system message. I'm using GPT for the 0125 version model. Gave it the same system message, and now I asked that same question: what's heavier, a kilo? What's heavier, a kilo of feathers or a pound of steel? It gave me the right answer. It said a kilo of feathers is heavier than a pound of steel, and it told me why. Kilo is a measurement of unit of mass metric. It actually equates to 2.2 pounds. So GPT-4 gave me the right answer. So, that was a quick little example of, think about how these things are actually working or being used, and try it out on your own. That's the bottom line with that.
Yep. I think we have literally thrown all the models into a rat race. We have
Yeah.
made AI really compete with each other. But I think it is fascinating that, good thing is that there is a lot of innovation happening between the companies. More and more is happening. Um, you know, and who knows what next is going to happen? Maybe another new player will come out from nowhere who will actually completely uh, raise the bar. So that's, I think, fascinating. The key thing is for corporates, right? I mean, I think I see a lot of corporates confused about and trying to find the perfect model or making the best decision. And I will say that on that line, look, it's not just a model, it's an entire ecosystem. There are lots of peripheral services. There is an entire platform. It's not just the only thing. There is a search service, there is a database, there is a NoSQL, there is a vector, a lot of things that goes along. So it's the entire ecosystem that defines the performance of the overall use case. It's not just the model performance. I think that's important. The capability is also important, as Jamie demonstrated. Use case to use case, performance, capability, outcome may differ. And I think that's what companies should look into. They should look into an overall platform, overall ecosystem, and continue with that part. Once you have put the confidence in a certain platform, you need to stick with it. You don't need to keep switching between back and forth, and you don't need to try everything with every model every time, because that will continue to happen. Every 3 months there will be another new model coming along.
Yeah, definitely. For sure.
Okay, so Jamie, good roundup. I think a lot of good things are going on. We'll continue to do this roundups, and I think we will try to limit these episodes to about 30 minutes or so, roughly. So not every episode we will do all the segments. Some of the segments like Jamie's toolbox, Shadal's business bag, and interviews, etc. They all will happen in different segments. So um, you know, don't feel that okay, the episode is truncated or cut short. The target is to keep the episode roughly about 30 minutes of duration, and the segments may differ episode to episode. But other than that, we would also actually love to know your comments and suggestions. Please leave them in the comment section. We will also be sharing some of the notes and some of the links as well in the comment section. But we really want actually you to tell us, how do you like this episode, what else we can do better.
Yeah, feedback is always a gift. So leave your thoughts, leave your comments. We will definitely read everything. So keep it coming. Put in
Yeah,
your comments when you can.
remember, it's not the only machine that want to learn. We also want to learn. So just keep
Very
sharing,
true.
and we are so excited releasing this first episode of this channel. Look forward to another one every 2 weeks. We'll try to actually keep that frequency and come out with another episode. With that, thank you everyone for your time and keep talking. Thank you, Jamie. See you
Thanks.
again.
Hey, Sean.
Bye.